I could talk Eagles with just about anybody. So, were you more of a Bernie Ledden Eagles fan, or did you like the rock stuff more, or is it all just great music to you?
I liked it all. Bernie that was a really cool era. Yes, I loved that whole Tequila Sunrise, those earlier records. That little album was really fantastic. And then, from there on, there was no stopping. I mean, Don Henley's voice is amazing, and those songs are pretty incredible. They still hold up. My kids, I have one senior in high school, my daughter, my youngest one, and she still loves hearing those kind of things. Like Hotel California never gets old. It doesn't even seem to really age. That's such an unusual tune, and saw those guys in 77, and the Doobie Brothers as well. It was kind of their final year. 79, I think, was the final year for them. And then I've been around Don Henley a little bit. Saw his live thing as well. He's a fantastic singer. And all those guys, there again, individually, they were amazing. Timothy Schmidt sang on my last record as far as Eagles go. And when the band broke up, I did one more album, Terry McBride and the Ride, and was looking for new voices because the original guys were gone. So we brought in Timothy Schmidt. He was just getting ready. That was 94, just getting ready to do the very first reunion tour with the Eagles. So that was a thrill. He's a fabulous, sweet guy and an amazing vocalist. I mean, he's a great singer in his own right. Yeah. And then you combine all those guys together, it's pretty impressive,
And he and Randy were both Poco guys, so they.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That whole sound of that. And dig this: the first time I met Vince Gill, he was in Pure Prairie League, which I love that.
Yeah,
band.
yeah.
Vince was the lead singer. I worked my way backstage. They were playing in Austin, and I gurmed him a little bit. And then next thing you know, he was a solo artist. And I ran into him in the mid '80s, '86, '87. I played the Opry House here with Delbert McClinton on a John Fogerty tour. And Vince came out. I had his album, and he couldn't believe it. It was that very first album on RCA. He didn't think I had it, and we went to the bus, and I had the cassette, actually, And we kind of hit it off and became friends over the years, kept running into each other, and then signed to MCA, which is where Vince was at the time. And he's always been a great guy and a phenomenal talent, to say the least. Terry
McBride is our guest from McBride and the Ride tonight in the Honky Tonk Time Machine. Man, it has been really fun catching up with you and talking music with you, Terry.
Likewise, Glenn. I enjoyed it, man. Appreciate it.
That new project you have coming out, it's called Rebels and Angels, correct?
Yeah, you're right. That's the title cut with Patty Loveless. That's the duet wrote that with Chris Stapleton. I've written a lot with Chris over the years. We've had a couple cool cuts, Alan Jackson and Gretchen Wilson and a few other people. We've just always enjoyed getting together and writing and hanging out. And that particular tune, we just wrote it. We sat on it for a few years, actually. Nothing really happened with it. And then I just thought lyrically it could fit. And so called Patty. She was gracious enough and really liked the song. That's a big, she has to like the song. She passed on the song. She said, Don Henley just sent me a tune. I didn't like it. So she passed. I went, oh, my gosh. So I was pretty thrilled and honored. Yeah, that's the title cut. And that'll be coming out. We'll probably start coming with some socials. We'll start introducing a single or two, out there, and then the album will hopefully come around in the fall.
Well, we know it's going to be good. And real quick on Chris Stapleton, he is my current favorite singer. Garth is my all-time favorite, but Chris is my current. He's just amazing, isn't he?
Have you met him yet, Chris?
I've not met Chris, no.
Oh, he's a humble, soft-spoken guy. He was always like that. Of course, then he came over to my house the very first time. He was completely uncomfortable, couldn't get comfortable on the couch, and I've never met him. He didn't have any success. He is just new, this is 15 years ago probably. Huh. And then once he started singing, man, I was completely knocked out. And he was playing a little club where I live in Franklin that night, a little place called Kimbrough's. He thought, man, I'm playing down here tonight. If you're not doing anything, man, come out and hear me. And I never want to go out and hear anybody. Once you sit down at the end of the day, you're kind of that's it, But I was so taken with him. I went, I'm going out, and I went down to hear him. He couldn't believe it. He was so, flattered that I would come down to see him, and then we just hit it off after that. I was so glad because I just liked him personally. He was different from anybody I'd met, really, personally and musically. Then I had a lot of instruments, pianos, guitars, basses. And he loved playing all of them, so we enjoyed that part of the whole creative process. I'd play bass sometime, or he would, or piano, or whatever, you know. And we wrote some really cool things, and that song in particular, I just wanted to kind of be the centerpiece of this new album. And of course, anything attached to Chris Stapleton these days doesn't hurt either. I like having him involved in that too.
You talk about him being different. I mean, that was evident from the start when Traveler came out. I think that different sound is why everybody just gravitated to him, and then all of a sudden the awards start coming.
Well, and he's a true artist. You know, he's going to play the guitar lick. Not that he can't bring in any world-class guy to do it. He just has a feel for what he wants to do. He's a true artist. You know, he knows the sound. He knows the songs. And, you know, even early on, he was in the Steel Drivers. He did some other things, and he really wasn't catching on yet. We were just shocked. There were a couple artists like that. Keith Urban was like that. He was in town about 10 years, and everybody kept saying, we'd go see Keith play at his little band, you know, at the time, the Ranch, and it was like, why hadn't this guy get discovered yet? You know, it was shocking. And the same thing with Chris. He'd been here almost 10 years or however long. We thought, you know, the timing just wasn't right for him. The industry hadn't really opened to people that were like him, that were different and didn't look a certain way. You know, it just wasn't right. Then the CMA Awards exposed him to a huge audience, and there was no denying how amazing his talent was. And then overnight, he became a success, you know. You
talk about two people who are probably the most talented people going right now, and it took them that long to get discovered, Keith Urban and Chris Stapleton. That's mind-blowing.
It was mind-blowing. Keith used to have a little sit-down gig where every week you could go hear him, you know, and everybody was buzzing, and he was traveling a little bit. He had that first little album out. It didn't do a lot, and so I was out with Brooks and Dunn. They invited him to come out and do a couple of dates to open just because they loved him so much from those club shows, you know. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he was just beside himself. All of a sudden he's on tour with Brooks and Dunn, you know, and it was a big thrill. But then eventually it clicked, you know, it took off for him. But he was phenomenal. I mean, his guitar skills alone, not to mention a great vocalist, and just a great guy. Keith is just the sweetest guy, you know. He was a fan of mine, and, you know, that's always interesting. You know, now looking back, it's really interesting. But he was out on tour with Brooks and Dunn and went back to his bus one day and got Sacred Ground CD and asked if I'd sign it for him. You know, I was like, yeah. He goes, he said, I never asked for an autograph. I said, well, man, I'm honored. I appreciate that. You know, dang it. I should have stuck a little closer to him, darn it, and written a few of those hits with him. But everybody finds their own path, their own way, you know. But anyway, it's been interesting for me on this side too, just seeing people like that, meeting so many wonderful people, and in this business, the country side of things, it's a lot of good people out there, you know, and it's been a great experience all the way. Looking all the way back over the years, I'm tickled to still kind of be in it, you know. I
meant to ask you too if Chris had his beard when you first met him.
Yeah, he wasn't quite as hairy and scruffy as he is now, but he was. Yeah, he's always been different, you know. And I remember we were at the BMI Awards one year, which is where the songwriters' annual event, sort of like the Grammys for songwriters. And if you've had a top single, you get honored that night, and they usually pick the 50 biggest tunes of the year, kind of thing. And I was fortunate to have a song selected that year, and hanging out with Chris. He was a young guy still. You know, he hadn't done anything. He hadn't had any big cuts or anything yet. And I told him, I said, man, Chris, don't worry, man. You're going to be right here one day. No doubt. He looked at me like I was crazy. You're like, man, you know, he just couldn't picture himself being there yet, you know?
Wow.
But he certainly can now.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive career.
Well, Terry McBride, his body of work speaks for itself. Be looking for Rebels and Angels out a little bit later this year. Look for McBride and the Ride out on the road, hopefully in 2021. Yeah. And anything else, Terry, you want to add before we let you go?
I think you covered it all, Glenn. I appreciate it. Good luck with the show. I dig what you're doing, and I think it's interesting. It gives people a little something different to hear, you know, and throwback is always cool, and the music was good during that era, so I wish you all the best, man.
Well, the McBride and the Ride fan base here in Southeast Missouri, Southern Illinois, Western Kentucky, it's still strong. So a ton of people around here excited to have you on tonight, and I'm especially honored that you came on with me. Thanks so much, Terry.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.